My son snatched the boarding pass from my hand and pointed at the automatic exit doors with his chin, as if I were a dog in the way in the hallway. I am Beatrice. I am 71 years old. I was a history teacher for 4 decades, and this trip was my golden dream. What my son Robert did not know is that the credit card that paid for that luxury carries my signature and my resentment. The international airport's air conditioning chilled my bones, but not as much as the coldness in my own son's eyes. We had arrived 3 hours early, just the way I like it, with the suitcases perfectly weighed and tagged. The terminal's bustle was heavenly music to me. The sound of suitcase wheels on the polished floor, the loudspeaker announcements in languages I barely understand but that sound like a promise, the smell of overpriced coffee and duty-free perfume. Everything screamed Paris. Everything screamed that, finally, after years of chalk dust, green blackboards, and grading exams until dawn, I was going to see the Eiffel Tower with my own eyes, slightly veiled by early cataracts. Robert walked ahead, pushing the cart with the 4 large suitcases. Beside him was my daughter-in-law, Chloe, wearing dark sunglasses even though we were indoors, typing furiously on her cell phone without deigning to look at me. I walked a step behind, clutching the purse where I kept my passport against my chest like a sacred relic. I felt light despite my worn-out knees. I had bought a new camel-colored coat, very elegant, and special comfortable shoes for walking down the Champs-Élysées. "Mom, hurry up. The priority check-in line is moving," Robert had told me minutes before with that tone of impatience he uses when he thinks I am not listening well. I smiled. I thought his nervousness was just the excitement of the trip. After all, I was treating them. The trip of a lifetime. That is what I told them when I handed over the printed itineraries at Christmas dinner. All expenses paid. First-class flights. A hotel overlooking the Seine. Dinners on boats. Everything came from my life savings, and from the sale of a plot of land that my late husband, rest his soul, had kept for our old age. Since he was no longer here, I wanted to share that abundance with my only son and his wife. We reached the dividing ribbon. The airline representative, impeccable with her silk scarf around her neck, motioned for us to step forward. It happened right there, right on that invisible boundary between everyday life and the dreamed adventure, where the world stopped. Robert turned around sharply. There was no affection in his eyes, only a hard, pragmatic determination that froze my blood. He reached out his hand not to help me, but to demand. "Give me the ticket, Mom." He said it dryly. I, naive as I was, thought he wanted to help me with the process. I handed it to him with a trembling hand, smiling like a fool. He took it, but instead of placing it next to his and Chloe's on the counter, he slipped it into the inside pocket of his sport coat. "What are you doing, son?" I asked, feeling a strange twist in my stomach. Robert sighed, like someone who has to explain a difficult lesson to a slow child. Chloe stopped looking at her phone and crossed her arms, looking away, chewing gum with her mouth open. "Mom, listen to me carefully," he said, lowering his voice so the people in line would not hear, though his tone was as sharp as a scalpel. "You are not going to Paris." The noise of the airport seemed to fade away. I could only hear the hum of my own blood pressure rising in my ears. "What?" I stammered. "But we are already here. The suitcases. My coat. Look at yourself, Mom." He interrupted me, pointing me up and down with contempt. "You can barely walk fast. You are going to get tired in 2 hours. You are going to be a burden. Chloe and I want to enjoy ourselves. It is practically our second honeymoon. We cannot be dragging a wheelchair around or stopping every 10 minutes for you to go to the bathroom. But I walk just fine, Robert. I take my daily walks in the park." I tried to defend myself, feeling the tears burning my eyes. The humiliation was starting to crawl up my neck. That was when he dropped the sentence that would stay burned into me like a branding iron. He put a hand on my shoulder, not to comfort me, but to push me slightly backward, out of the line. Besides, someone has to stay behind. We could not find anyone we trust, so take a cab and go back to the house. Stay and watch the cats. Whiskers needs his medicine, and you know Shadow does not like dry food. "The cats?" I repeated, in disbelief. Was he trading my Paris for 2 cats that were not even mine, but theirs? "Yes, the cats. Make yourself useful, Mom. You are getting too old for this kind of running around. We will bring you a keychain or something. Now go. You are making us lose our turn." Chloe let out a nervous little laugh and finally spoke. "Oh, mother-in-law, do not make a scene. It is better for you." You will be comfortable on the couch watching your daytime shows. Paris is very dirty and there are too many people. We are doing you a favor." Robert turned his back to me. He took the suitcases, including mine, that red suitcase where I had packed my best dresses and my travel journal, and stepped up to the counter. He did not even look at me one last time. He simply discarded me. He erased me from the equation, as if I were a miscalculation in his perfect plan. I stood there, right in the middle of the flow of people, with my purse clutched to my chest and my heart shattered into pieces. People walked around me, dodging me. Some looked at me with pity. An abandoned old woman in the line, with teary eyes and dressed up for a trip she would never take. I felt such a deep shame that I wanted the granite floor to open up and swallow me. How had I raised such a selfish human being? I, who taught him how to walk, who paid for his college with overtime, who took care of him when he had that fever that almost took him away. I, Beatrice, the respected teacher, the woman who explained the French Revolution with fierce passion, now reduced to a cat sitter. My legs gave out. I looked around for a bench, but they were all taken. I leaned against a cold column. The image of Robert and Chloe laughing with the ticket agent as they handed over their passports looked blurry through my tears. They were checking their bags. They were leaving. They were leaving with my money, with my dream, and with my dignity. "Go home," he had told me. "Make yourself useful." The word useful echoed in my head. For years, ever since I retired, they had made me feel that my only utility was to serve them, to watch the house when they went out, to lend them money for the new car, to cook on Sundays so they would not have to spend. They had convinced me that I was old, slow, and clumsy, and I, out of love, out of a desire not to see reality, had believed them. I wiped my tears with the back of my hand. The rough fabric of my new coat scratched my skin, and that tiny jolt of pain woke me up. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of jet fuel and burnt coffee. I looked toward the exit, toward where the taxis were waiting. It would be so easy to obey, to go home, put on my old bathrobe, serve food to the cats, and cry in silence while they toasted with champagne on the plane. That is what yesterday's Beatrice would do. The self-sacrificing mother, the victim. But then, my right hand, almost on instinct, slipped inside my purse and touched my leather wallet. My fingers brushed against the cold plastic of my credit cards. I remembered the moment at the travel agency 3 months ago. Robert wanted to use his card to rack up the points, but, unfortunately, he did not have enough funds. I pulled out mine, the black card, the exclusive one, the one the bank offered me for keeping my life savings with them. "I am paying for it all, do not worry," I said that day with pride. Everything, absolutely everything was in my name. The airline tickets, the 5-star hotel reservation, the private tours, even the travel insurance. I looked back toward the counter. Robert and Chloe were no longer there. They had passed the first checkpoint and were heading toward security. They looked so confident, so entirely on top of the world, walking with that arrogance of people who believe parents are endless and disposable resources. They think I am a senile old woman who does not know how the modern world works. They think I am going to go home and cry. A strange calm, cold and metallic, replaced my anguish. It was not hatred, it was something far more potent, it was absolute clarity. I am a history teacher. I know perfectly well that the greatest empires fall when they underestimate those they consider weak. I know that Marie Antoinette lost her head because she failed to understand that the people had hunger and power. And my son Robert had just made the historical mistake of his life, underestimating the woman who taught him how to read and write. I smoothed out my coat. I fixed my gray hair that had gotten messy in the hustle. I lifted my chin. My knees no longer hurt. In fact, I felt a strength in my legs that I had not felt in 20 years. I did not walk toward the exit. I turned around and my steps echoed firmly, my heels clicking with authority on the shiny floor. I did not go toward the check-in line where they had been. I went straight to the main counter, the one with the big, bright sign that says, Sales and Customer Service, Management. There was a short line. I waited my turn with the infinite patience of someone who has proctored 2-hour exams in absolute silence. When the young man at the counter called me forward, he did not see me crying. He saw an older, elegant woman with a gaze made of steel. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help you?" the young man asked, politely. I took out my passport, my official ID, and, most importantly, the black credit card. I placed it on the counter with a soft, yet highly definitive tap. The sound was dry, like a judge's gavel handing down a sentence. "Good morning, young man," I said with my teacher voice, the one I used to silence a classroom of 50 rowdy teenagers. "I need to handle an urgent matter regarding 3 tickets to Paris purchased with this card. I am the primary account holder and the payer for the entire reservation." The young man typed something into his computer and nodded upon seeing the tier of my card. "Of course, Ms. Beatrice. I see the reservation right here. 3 passengers. You, Mr. Robert, and Mrs. Chloe. The flight leaves in," he checked his watch, 45 minutes. "They have already checked in. What seems to be the problem?" I looked down the security corridor where my son and daughter-in-law had disappeared. I pictured their smiling faces, probably taking a selfie to post on social media with the caption, "Off to Paris." "The problem," I said, looking him directly in the eyes with a serenity that bordered on terrifying, "is that there has been a radical change of plans. I need to cancel my companion's tickets immediately." The young man blinked in surprise. "Cancel? But ma'am, they already checked their luggage. If we cancel now, their boarding passes will be invalidated at the departure gate and—" "Exactly," I interrupted him, flashing a smile that did not quite reach my eyes. "That is exactly what I want. I want the machine to flash red when they try to board that plane. I want a full refund to my card or a credit in my favor. I do not care about the penalty fee. But those 2 tickets need to cease to exist right this second." The employee looked at me with a mixture of confusion and deep respect. "Understood. And your ticket, ma'am? Should we cancel that one too?" I paused. I thought about the cats. I thought about my empty house. I thought about Paris. And then I thought about the suitcases that Chloe had taken. Where were my clothes going? "One moment," I said, while my mind mapped out the final strategy. "Do not cancel mine just yet. First, make sure they do not fly. Erase them from the system. Leave no trace of their reservation. Proceeding," he said, typing rapidly. "I need your authorization and signature right here." I signed with a remarkably steady hand, without a single letter shaking. The B in Beatrice had never looked so large and proud. As the ink dried on the paper, I felt a 200-pound weight lift off my shoulders. It was not the weight of the suitcases, it was the weight of years of sheer ingratitude. "All set, ma'am. Robert and Chloe's tickets are canceled. The system just sent the alert to the boarding gate. When they scan their codes, they will be denied access due to cancellation by the payment holder." "Perfect," I muttered. "Anything else?" "Yes," I said, checking my watch. There were 30 minutes left until boarding. Plenty of time. "Tell me, young man, what happens to the luggage when a passenger does not fly due to a gate cancellation?" "For security reasons, ma'am, the luggage must be removed from the airplane. A suitcase cannot travel without its owner. They will have to identify it out on the tarmac or in the baggage claim area. It will delay the flight a bit, but that is the protocol." A dark satisfaction coursed through my body. Not only were they not going to Paris, but they would have to suffer the utter embarrassment of being pulled off the flight, of having to hunt down their suitcases, and of explaining exactly why the useless old woman had the power to leave them grounded. "Very well," I said, putting my card away. "Thank you for your efficiency." I turned around. I did not walk toward the taxi stand. I walked straight toward the security checkpoint. I had my passport and my digital boarding pass on my phone, which fortunately Robert had not taken from me, because old women do not understand technology. Well, this old woman understood plenty. I was not going home to take care of cats. I was going to walk right up to that departure gate, not to get on the plane perhaps because they had taken all my clothes, but definitely to watch the show. I wanted to see the exact moment when reality smacked them right in the face. I wanted to see Robert's expression when the scanner made that nasty error sound. I walked toward the security screening with my head held high. For the first time in years, I was not the mother, nor the grandmother, nor the widow. I was Beatrice, the owner of the card, the master of my own destiny, and I was about to give them the most painful history lesson of their lives. I walked through the metal detector with my heart beating in my throat, but not out of fear, rather from a mix of pure adrenaline and that strange clarity that anger gives you when you truly have nothing left to lose. The security officer, a heavy-set kid with a bored face, did not even look at me twice. To him and the rest of the world, I was just a harmless elderly woman in a camel coat with a purse clutched to her chest. "Go ahead, mother. Careful now," he told me, giving me a half-hearted wave of his hand. Mother, that word that used to fill me with pride, now tasted like ashes in my mouth. I thanked him with a slight nod and grabbed my gray plastic bin. My belongings were few: my cell phone, my cheap wristwatch, and the money belt I wore hidden under my blouse, the one Robert had made fun of, saying it was for paranoid old ladies. Oh, the irony. If he had known what I was carrying in there, he probably would have strip-searched me himself before tossing me aside like old garbage. I walked toward the duty-free shops. The glare from the liquor bottles and the shelves of expensive perfumes made me a little dizzy. I looked for a quiet corner, near a huge window where you could see the parked airplanes, sitting there like massive metallic birds waiting to be fed. I sat down on a stiff metal chair and took out my phone. My hands, marked by age spots and prominent veins, moved with an agility that would shock my daughter-in-law Chloe. She and Robert always assumed that technology and I were mortal enemies. "Oh, mother-in-law, put that down, you are going to mess up the TV settings," Chloe would say every time I grabbed the remote control. "Mom, do not touch my computer. You are not going to understand it," Robert would repeat. What they did not know is that ever since I was widowed, I enrolled in the free courses at the public library. I learned how to use online banking, how to download travel apps, and how to manage email better than many of my former students. I unlocked the screen. The brightness was turned all the way up, with the font size huge. Yes, because my eyesight is failing, but my brain remains completely intact. I opened the banking app. There was the confirmation. Refund in progress for cancellation of airline services. The figure was high, painfully high. It was my retirement money, my sacrifices, returning to my account like a loyal soldier coming back home. Then, I opened the airline's app. There were the names. Passenger, Beatrice, confirmed. Passenger, Robert, cancelled. Passenger, Chloe, cancelled. Seeing those red letters next to their names sent an electric jolt down the back of my neck. It was not revenge, I kept telling myself as I stared at the screen. It was historical justice. As a teacher, I always taught that every action has a reaction, and that tyrants usually fall because of their own sheer arrogance. Robert and Chloe had acted like domestic tyrants, and now the invisible guillotine of reality was about to drop right on their necks. But then a sudden doubt hit me. Now what? They had my large suitcase, they had my dresses, my comfortable shoes, my arthritis creams. I was sitting there with just the clothes on my back and my handbag. I touched my waist, feeling the bulge of the money belt under my clothes. I was carrying something in there that they had completely forgotten about in their rush to get rid of me. The cash in euros. 3,000 euros that I had exchanged at the bank 2 weeks ago and decided to bring with me just in case, strapped to my body, the old-fashioned way. Plus, I had my essential medications right in my purse. I never travel without them in the cabin, a habit my late husband instilled in me. I have the money, I have the passport, I have my blood pressure under control, I whispered to myself. I stood up and walked over to the departure monitors. Flight AF 452 to Paris. Gate 18. Boarding in 20 minutes. As I made my way down the endless concourse, I caught my reflection in the glass of a sunglasses shop. I saw a small woman with short white hair, walking with absolute determination. Over the last 5 years, ever since I moved in with them so I would not be alone, that woman in the reflection had been shrinking. I had become the shadow of the house, the one who washes the dishes in silence while they binge-watch shows, the one who hands over her credit card and does not ask when she will get it back. I remembered last week. Robert came home screaming because he could not find his blue dress shirt. I had washed it, ironed it, and hung it right in his closet, but he just did not see it. "You are a disaster, Mom. You are not even good for cleaning a room anymore," he yelled at me. I lowered my head and apologized. I actually apologized for doing his laundry. At what exact moment did Beatrice, the woman who organized teachers' unions in the 80s, turn into that frightened little mouse? The airport was packed with people, families rushing, businessmen talking on their phones, young couples kissing. Nobody noticed me. To them, I was just part of the furniture. And right there was where I realized my true power: invisibility. Robert and Chloe would not be looking for me. They would be absolutely certain that I was sitting in a taxi, crying on my way home to feed their cats. They would never expect me to be 50 yards from the boarding gate, watching them. Their arrogance was my perfect camouflage. They think I am weak, slow, and dependent. They think that without them, I am nothing. I reached the waiting area for Gate 18. I adjusted my glasses and found a strategic seat, right behind a wide column decorated with an ad for an international bank. From there, I had a perfect view of the gate counter and the line that was starting to form, and there they were. I saw them by the windows, taking pictures of themselves. Chloe was doing those ridiculous poses with her lips puckered, kicking one leg back, while Robert tried to find the best angle with his phone. They looked happy, they looked triumphant, they were laughing. They were probably joking about how incredibly easy it was to dump the old lady. "You will see how much fun we have without her," I imagined Chloe saying. "With all the money we save on her meals, we can go shopping at the Galeries Lafayette." I felt a sharp pang of pain. I will not deny it. He is my son. He is the little boy I rocked to sleep, whose scraped knees I bandaged, the one I taught to respect his elders. What did I do wrong? Was it too much love? Was it giving him everything I never had? Perhaps my biggest mistake was becoming his eternal safety net, preventing him from ever learning how to fall and get back up on his own. But the pain quickly gave way to the coldness of a master strategist. I checked my watch. 10 minutes until boarding would begin. I pulled a small notebook out of my purse that I always carry with me. It is an old teacher's habit, writing everything down. I opened to a fresh page and wrote the date. Then I wrote Operation Paris, the final lesson. I started evaluating my resources with cold precision. 1. The ticket. I have a seat in business class, row 2A. They had 2C and 2D. Those seats were now entirely empty in the system. 2. The luggage. My red suitcase was checked under Robert's name. When they stopped him, they would have to pull all the bags linked to his reservation. That meant my suitcase would be taken off too. I would not be able to get it back today without canceling my own trip. 3. The destination. Paris, a place I only know from books, but that I have walked through 1,000 times in my imagination. Could I really go by myself? At 71 years old, without my clothes, to a foreign country? I looked down at my comfortable orthopedic shoes. I looked at my warm coat. I touched the cash at my waist. More than enough. Why not? I whispered. The idea was terrifying and deeply intoxicating all at once. I always thought I needed Robert to travel. "Mom, you do not know English. Mom, you are going to get lost on the subway." They had completely convinced me of my own uselessness. But thinking about it now, who organized field trips for 200 students? I did. Who managed the household finances when my husband got sick? I did. Who learned how to use a smartphone all by herself? I did. The flight attendant's voice interrupted my thoughts over the loudspeakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. We will now begin boarding for flight AF452 with service to Paris Charles de Gaulle. We invite our first class, business class, and platinum members to approach the gate." The moment had finally arrived. I watched Robert and Chloe jump up as if they had springs in their shoes. They grabbed their designer carry-on bags, Christmas gifts from me last year, and headed straight for the priority line, with that masters of the universe attitude that hurt me so much to see. Chloe fixed her hair, and Robert pulled the boarding passes out of his pocket. Those very pieces of paper he had snatched from my hands just minutes before. My heart started pounding hard, like a war drum. I stood up from my seat behind the column, but I did not step closer. I stood completely still, like a spectator in the front row of a theater. They moved forward. There was one couple ahead of them. The attendant scanned the couple's codes. Beep, green light. They walked through. Now it was my son's turn. I saw him flash that charming smile at the gate agent, the one he uses whenever he wants to get something. He handed her the 2 passes. Chloe was right next to him, staring at her phone, looking bored, just waiting to get into the jet bridge to take her picture in the airplane seat holding a glass of champagne. The attendant took Robert's ticket and placed it under the laser scanner. Time seemed to stop completely. In my mind, I heard the dead silence right before the storm. I knew exactly what was going to happen, but actually seeing it play out was something else entirely. The scanner let out a deep, long, and nasty buzz, completely different from the cheerful beep of the previous passengers. A red light flashed on the small screen at the counter. Robert frowned, confused. "It must be a printing error," he told the girl with a tone of slight annoyance, as if it were her fault. "Try it again." The attendant, maintaining her professional calm, swiped the code again. Buzz. Red light again. I watched Robert's posture shift immediately. His shoulders tensed up. Chloe looked up from her phone, pulling off her sunglasses. "What is wrong, Rob?" she asked, loud enough for me to hear from my hiding spot. "Nothing. This machine is garbage," he snapped back. Then he handed Chloe's ticket to the attendant. "Try this one." The girl scanned it. Buzz. Red light. The attendant started typing away on her keyboard. Her face shifted from cheerful customer service to a look of strict administrative seriousness. "Sir, these boarding passes are not valid. The reservation has been canceled." "What?" Robert yelled. Several heads in the line turned around to look. "That is impossible. We checked in an hour ago. We have checked bags." "I am sorry, sir. It says right here, full cancellation requested by the primary payment holder 20 minutes ago." I saw all the color drain straight out of my son's face. He turned as pale as a sheet of paper. Chloe let out a choked gasp. "The payment holder?" Robert stammered. "But the card." And right then I watched him put it together. It was like watching a light bulb turn on in slow motion. His eyes went wide. He whipped his head around, looking back toward the terminal, frantically scanning the crowd. He was looking for the useless little old lady. He was looking for the mother he had ordered to go watch the cats. I took a step to the side, stepping completely out from the cover of the column. I stood firm, my feet planted shoulder-width apart, my camel coat looking impeccable, and my handbag gripped tightly. Our eyes locked across a distance of 60 feet. He saw me, and for the first time in years, he did not see an elderly woman in his way. He saw Beatrice. He saw the contained fury, the wounded dignity, and the absolute power that I held over his destiny in that precise moment. His mouth dropped open to say something, maybe Mom, but no sound came out. Chloe followed his gaze and saw me too. She dropped her designer bag right on the floor. I did not smile. I did not make any obscene gestures. I simply raised my right hand holding my own phone, where the QR code of my valid boarding pass was shining brightly, and I gave him a slow, deliberate wave of my fingers, a final goodbye. The flight attendant was already calling security or a supervisor. I do not know which, but chaos was starting to erupt all around them. The people in line began to complain. "Sir, you need to step aside. You are blocking the boarding process," the attendant said with a firm voice. "No, wait, that is my mother. She has to fix this," Robert yelled, pointing at me with a shaking finger. He started storming toward me, completely ignoring the staff's instructions. "Security!" the attendant called out. I held my ground. I did not take a single step back. I felt a glacial calm. I was no longer the victim. I was the judge, and the sentence had just been handed down. In that exact instant, I realized something fundamental. For years, I believed my life had ended when I retired, that my story was already written and I was just meant to be an epilogue in my son's life. How incredibly wrong I was. My story, my real story, was just getting started in Terminal 2 of the airport. Robert was coming at me with his face completely distorted by rage and sheer panic, but I was not afraid. I had the card, I had the moral high ground, and above all, I had the iron will that I thought I had lost somewhere between cooking recipes and doctor's appointments. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the recycled airport air that suddenly tasted like the purest air of freedom. I was ready for the next move. The game had changed, and the black pieces had just called checkmate. I did not back up a single inch when Robert lunged toward me. During my 40 years in the classroom, I learned that when a problem student tries to intimidate you with their size or their voice, the absolute worst thing you can do is show fear. Fear has a scent, and predators, even if they are your own children, feed right off it. I stood perfectly still, with my back straight and my chin up, holding my purse with both hands right at my waist, in that posture of infinite patience I used to strike while waiting for a classroom to shut up. "Mom!" Robert roared, stopping just 3 feet away from me, only because a security guard, a tall man in a navy blue uniform, stepped right into his path. "What did you do? Tell them it is a mistake. Tell them you are confused." His voice echoed through the waiting area, making several people drop their magazines and lower their phones just to watch the show. I felt the stares burning into the back of my neck, but this time they did not burn with shame like they did at the check-in counter. This time, the shame was not mine to carry. "Sir, I am going to ask you to lower your voice and keep your distance," the guard said with a heavy, authoritative tone, placing a hand squarely on my son's chest. Robert flailed his arms in desperation, his face red and shining with sweat. Chloe came running up right behind him with her mascara smudged under her eyes, breathing heavily, dragging those designer heels that were clearly never meant for sprinting through a terminal. "She is my mother," he yelled, pointing at me as if I were some lost piece of luggage. "She is an elderly person. She does not know what she is doing. I am sure she canceled it by accident on her cell phone." She does not understand technology. She has to fix it right now. He stared at me with those bulging eyes, fully expecting me to nod, to lower my head and say, "Yes, honey, I am sorry. I am just a foolish old woman. Let me fix it." He fully expected me to pull out the card and pay the penalty fee, to humiliate myself publicly just to save their precious vacation. But I did not say a word. I just looked at him. I looked at him with a level of absolute tranquility that seemed to unnerve him far more than any screaming match ever could. I maintained the silence, that heavy, dense silence I used whenever a student showed up without their homework. I let his shouting echo and slowly fade out. I let his total lack of control stand in stark contrast to my perfect composure. "Mom, say something," he insisted, lowering his volume just a bit when he saw the guard was not moving. "Tell them to reactivate the tickets. We are going to miss the plane." Chloe grabbed onto Robert's arm, gasping for air. "Mother-in-law, please, my suitcases, my clothes. This is not funny. If this is a joke because of the cats, we get it. But fix it." There it was, the mention of the cats, the absolute confirmation that they knew exactly why this was happening, even if they refused to admit it in front of authority. I took one step forward, slowly, with the elegance of someone walking down the aisle or taking the witness stand. I looked the security guard right in the eyes and gave him a slight smile, the smile of a harmless but sharply lucid grandmother. "Officer," I said, my voice clear and perfectly calm, easily audible to all the onlookers gathering around us. "This man is indeed my son, but I am afraid the only one who is confused here is him." Robert opened his mouth in pure outrage. "What are you saying? You canceled it. The girl at the counter said it was you." "That is correct," I replied, turning my head to look directly at him. My eyes locked onto his, and I saw the exact moment when doubt began to fracture his arrogance. "I canceled the tickets, Robert. It was not a slip of the finger. It was not the senile dementia you love to imply that I have. It was an executive decision." The silence that followed my words was absolutely delicious. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Chloe let go of Robert's arm and clamped a hand over her mouth. "But why?" he stammered, his voice reduced to a childish squeak. "You already paid for everything. The money is already spent. Money can be recovered, son." "Dignity cannot," I said softly. I took one step closer, just enough so that the smell of his expensive cologne, the one he bought with the money I lent him last month, hit my nose. "You told me to go home. You told me to make myself useful. You told me to watch the cats because I was a burden on your second honeymoon. Do you remember?" Robert darted his eyes around, nervously realizing that people were listening. His face went from red back to pale. The narrative of the crazy old mother was crumbling right out from under him. Now he was the villain of the story, and the entire audience knew it. "Mom, that was just a figure of speech. We were stressed," he tried to justify himself, lowering his voice, desperately trying to regain some control. "You cannot do this to us here. The bags are already inside. Chloe has her medicine in her suitcase." "That is a lie," I cut in sharply. "Chloe has her makeup in her suitcase. Her vitamins are in her handbag. I am the one who carries blood pressure medication, and fortunately, I have it right here with me." I pulled out my cell phone. The screen was glowing with the airline's notification. "Boarding in progress. Look, Robert," I said, showing him the phone but not letting him touch it. "I am not confused. I know perfectly well what I did. I walked into the management office. I identified myself as the holder of the platinum card that has been paying for all your little whims for the last 10 years, and I revoked my generosity." "But you cannot just leave us here," Chloe shrieked, totally losing her composure. "What are we going to do? Everything is booked under your name." "Exactly." I nodded, savoring every single syllable. "The hotel, the tours, the boat on the Seine, everything is in my name. And as the account holder, I have the absolute right to decide who accompanies me. And I have decided that I prefer solitude over the company of two people who treat me like a piece of old furniture." The security guard coughed discreetly to hide a smile. Robert ran his hands through his hair in pure desperation. He looked like a toddler who just got a stolen toy snatched right back out of his hands. "Mom, please." His tone shifted completely. Now he was begging. It was that sweet, syrupy voice he used whenever he needed money for a car down payment. "Do not hold a grudge. We are asking you to forgive us, okay? We are sorry. It was stupid. We were just nervous about the trip. But do not do this to us. You are going to make us lose thousands of dollars." No, Robert, I said, completely implacable. I am going to lose thousands of dollars. You two are not going to lose a single red cent, because you did not put in a single red cent. The only thing you are going to lose is the opportunity to take pictures to show off a lifestyle you cannot actually afford. The flight attendant at the boarding gate grabbed her microphone. Final boarding call for flight AF452 with service to Paris. All remaining passengers, please board at this time. The sound of the announcement acted like a trigger. Robert tried to take a step toward the counter, ignoring me entirely, as if he could somehow convince the airline to ignore the actual cardholder. "Miss!" he yelled toward the attendant. "It is just a family misunderstanding. Let us through and we will sort it all out in Paris." The attendant shook her head without even looking up at him, totally focused on her screen. "Sir, if you do not have a valid boarding pass, you cannot go through. And I must ask you to leave the boarding area right now, or I will have to call the federal police. You are blocking the way." Robert spun back toward me one last time. His eyes were welling up with tears, but not tears of sadness, just pure, impotent frustration. "Mom, are you seriously going to do this to us? Are you really going to go home and just leave us stranded here?" That was exactly when I dropped the final piece of my strategy, the one they never even saw coming. I adjusted my new coat. I slung my purse over my shoulder with a highly decisive motion. "Who said I am going home?" I asked with one raised eyebrow. Robert and Chloe froze completely solid. "What?" they asked in perfect unison. "I have a valid ticket, Robert," I said, pointing toward the boarding door with an elegant flick of my wrist. "Row 2, seat A, window." I have always wanted to look at the clouds from above, without someone asking me to switch seats because the sun is bothering them. Chloe's jaw practically hit the floor. Robert looked like he had just taken a physical punch straight to the gut. "You are leaving? You are going by yourself?" he whispered in total disbelief. "But you do not even know how to hail a cab. You are going to die out there alone. You do not speak French." I smiled, a completely genuine smile, overflowing with a confidence that had been lying dormant under thick layers of maternal submission. "I have Google Translate, Robert, and I have something much more important. I have peace. Besides, I am a history teacher. Paris is in the books I have been reading my entire life. I know that city far better than you do. You only wanted to go to buy designer clothes." I turned around. I turned my back on them, that same back that had hunched over so many times to carry all their problems, but now it was perfectly straight and firm. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, turning my head just a fraction, just enough so they could hear me perfectly. "About the cats." I watched them perk up, probably hoping I was going to toss them my house keys or offer some final instruction of salvation. "I hope you put enough dry food in the dispensers," I said with absolute coldness, "because you are going to have plenty of free time to watch them yourselves. You are in luck. The taxi ride back home will be much cheaper than the flight to Paris." I started walking toward the attendant. My comfortable shoes clicked against the blue carpet of the boarding area. I felt a lightness in my body that I had not felt since I was 20 years old. "Mom! Mom, you cannot do this!" I heard Robert's screams behind my back, but they sounded distant, as if they were coming from another dimension, from a past life that no longer belonged to me. "My suitcases, Beatrice. My clothes!" Chloe shrieked. I reached the counter. The flight attendant looked at me. She had watched the entire scene unfold. Her eyes were shining with a mix of surprise and, I dare say, genuine admiration. "Good afternoon, ma'am," she said, with a tone that was much warmer than standard protocol. "Your boarding pass?" I handed her my phone. My hands were not shaking. "Here you go, miss. Just me, Beatrice." The scanner went beep. A beautiful, bright green light lit up on the console. "Welcome aboard, Miss Beatrice. Have an excellent flight." I crossed the threshold into the jet bridge. The very air changed. It smelled like adventure, freshly brewed coffee, and pure freedom. I did not look back. I knew exactly what I was leaving behind. Two selfish adults dealing with airport police, trying to retrieve suitcases that were probably already being unloaded onto the tarmac, and facing the harsh reality that their personal bank had just closed its doors forever. As I walked down the telescoping hallway, I felt a single tear roll down my cheek. I did not wipe it away. It was a tear of mourning for the son I thought I had, but it was also the water that nourished the seed of the woman who was finally being reborn. I stepped onto the plane. The business class cabin was an absolute oasis of calm and luxury. A flight attendant greeted me with a glass of champagne before I even sat down. "May I take your coat, ma'am?" Yes, thank you, I replied, handing it over. I sat down in 2A. The seat was wide, soft, made of real leather. I looked out the window. Down below, on the tarmac, I saw the luggage carts moving around. I imagined Robert and Chloe up there, behind the glass, watching me leave. I had executed my plan in total silence, without violence, using the exact same weapons they had used against me. Underestimation. They thought I would not be capable. They thought a mother's love was a life sentence of servitude. I took a sip of the champagne. The bubbles tickled my nose. To your health, Whiskers and Shadow, I whispered, raising my glass toward the window. Take good care of my son. He is going to need some serious comforting when he sees his own credit card statement. The plane began to move. The roar of the engines vibrated deep in my chest, syncing up perfectly with the beating of my heart. Paris was waiting for me, and for the first time in my entire life, I was not the one staying behind, waving goodbye with a handkerchief. I was the one doing the flying. The roar of the engines grew louder. A powerful vibration traveled from the floor of the plane straight up to my tired feet, as if the machine itself were giving me the strength I had been missing for years. As the plane angled up toward the sky, leaving gravity and ingratitude far behind, I looked out the oval window. Down below, the airport turned into a harmless little scale model of lights and concrete. I pictured Robert and Chloe down there, tiny, utterly insignificant, fighting with the ground crew, hunting for their suitcases that had been cast out onto the runway like pariahs. The fasten seatbelt sign clicked off with a soft ding. It was the sound of my total liberation. More champagne, Miss Beatrice? The flight attendant asked, a young French woman with a smile that held absolutely zero condescension. Yes, please, I replied, settling into the seat that was far more comfortable than the sofa in my own living room. And bring me the dinner menu, if you would be so kind. I have an appetite that is decades overdue. As the plane leveled out above the clouds, which looked like a massive field of cotton illuminated by the late afternoon sun, I decided to do something that would have previously caused me a panic attack. I connected my phone to the airplane's Wi-Fi. I knew the service cost an extra $20. Yesterday, I would have thought that was a reckless waste of money. Today, it felt like a highly justified investment in entertainment. The second the network connected, my cell phone started vibrating like it was having convulsions. The notifications cascaded in, one after another, stacking up on the screen with palpable desperation. 10 missed calls from Robert the son, 5 missed calls from Chloe the daughter-in-law, 15 WhatsApp messages. I opened Robert's chat with clinical calm, like a teacher reviewing a failing exam to see exactly where the student went wrong. Mom, this is complete madness. Come back. They pulled us out of line like common criminals. Everyone is staring at us. Chloe is crying in the bathroom. She says you ruined her life. Where are you? The flight attendant says the plane doors are closed. Tell them to stop it. I read every single message while sipping my drink. I felt no guilt, not a single drop. What I felt was a strange anthropological fascination. Did they genuinely believe I had the power to stop a Boeing 777 mid-takeoff just because they were feeling uncomfortable? Was their egocentrism so massive that they thought the laws of aeronautics would bend to their tantrums? I typed out a reply, but then I deleted it. No, responding would be playing their game. Responding would be giving them the attention they were demanding. And my attention, starting today, was an exclusive resource strictly for myself. Instead of replying, I opened my banking app. Right there was my true power, the scepter and crown of this exiled queen. I looked at the available balance, heavily beefed up by the refund of their first-class tickets. It was a small fortune. Money I had saved by depriving myself of coffees, of new clothes, of taxi rides. Money that was going to be squandered on designer bags for Chloe, and fancy dinners where Robert would never let me speak. I went to the section for authorized user cards. There they were. Card 1, Robert. Miscellaneous expenses. Card 2, Chloe. Emergencies. I let out a dry laugh that made the passenger across the aisle look over at me with sheer curiosity. Chloe's last emergency had been a pair of Italian shoes that were on sale. My finger hovered over the virtual button that read, "Temporarily block." I stared at it for a second. I thought about when Robert was a little boy and I would hand him my coin purse so he could buy ice cream. I thought about how that innocent trust had slowly mutated into blatant abuse. I pressed the button. Confirm block, yes. I did the exact same thing with Chloe's card. Confirm block, yes. The screen displayed a little red padlock next to both of their names. It was infinitely more satisfying than any history lesson I had ever taught on the fall of the Roman Empire. I had just cut the supply line. The aqueduct of Rome had officially run dry. 5 minutes later, the exact message arrived that confirmed my theory. Mom, we tried to order an Uber XL for the bags and the card was declined. It says insufficient funds or card blocked. Unblock it right now. We are standing on the curb at Terminal 2 and it is going to rain. I smiled. Justice is sometimes delayed, but when it finally arrives, it is completely implacable. They had no cash. They never carried cash because that is just for old people, and their personal credit cards were surely maxed out or canceled for non-payment, which was exactly why they used mine. They were stranded, with 4 giant suitcases, 2 carry-on bags, no car, no money, and no maid left to solve their lives for them. I looked out the window. The sky was darkening, painting itself in shades of violet and orange. I pictured Chloe in her high heels trying to drag the red suitcase, my suitcase with my clothes inside it, through the city drizzle. They would have to call a friend or, even worse, take public transportation. They would have to carry their own heavy loads. They would have to feel the actual weight of reality in their own muscles, the very muscles that had completely atrophied due to the endless comfort I had always provided them. The flight attendant returned with a white linen tablecloth and real silver cutlery. For dinner, ma'am, we have duck confit with a red berry reduction or lobster thermidor. The lobster? I said without a second of hesitation. And please, bring me a glass of water with ice. I need to take my blood pressure pill. I want to be in absolutely perfect condition when we land. Excellent choice. While I waited for the food, an intrusive thought suddenly ambushed me. My clothes. Everything I had packed with so much love was down in the cargo hold of that airport, probably being grumpily claimed by Robert right now. I was heading to Paris with only the clothes on my back, a pair of dress slacks, a silk blouse, my camel coat, and my orthopedic shoes. I looked down at my empty hands. I had no pajamas. I had no toothbrush. I had no elegant dresses for the evening dinners. For a split second, the deep fear of the helpless old woman tried to rear its ugly head. What am I going to do? But then, I remembered the black card sitting inside my purse. I remembered the 3,000 euros strapped around my waist. I remembered that I was flying straight to the fashion capital of the entire world. I have no clothes, I muttered to myself. And then, a nervous little giggle escaped my lips, quickly transforming into a soft, genuine laugh. I have no old lady clothes. That was the truth of it. It was not a tragedy. It was a massive opportunity. All those clothes packed in that suitcase were respectable older woman clothes, outfits specifically chosen so I would not embarrass Robert, neutral colors designed to make me blend in and disappear. Now, I could buy whatever I wanted. I could walk into a boutique on the Champs-Élysées and buy myself a bright red dress or an electric blue silk scarf. I could dress exactly like the woman I damn well pleased to be, not like the mother they constantly wanted me to be. The man sitting in seat 2D, right across the aisle, was watching me. He was a gentleman in his late 60s, with neatly groomed silver hair, reading a thick book on architecture. "Forgive the intrusion," he said with a deep, highly polite voice, "but you look incredibly happy, and it is quite contagious." I turned to look at him. At any other time in my life, I would have shrunk back into my seat, completely embarrassed for laughing out loud by myself. But the champagne and the raw freedom had loosened my tongue. "I am, sir. I am celebrating a very belated independence." He closed his book and smiled. "First time in Paris?" "First time in my entire life," I corrected him. "I was a history teacher for 40 years. I have taught the French Revolution thousands of times. I know exactly where the Bastille fell and the exact streets Robespierre walked, but I have never actually smelled the Seine." "Oh, you are going to love it," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "Paris is a city that deeply respects history and those who know it. By the way, I am Julian, an architect. Beatrice, a traveler." The word slipped right out of my mouth before I could even think about it. A traveler. Not a mother, not a grandmother, not a widow. A traveler. I really liked how it sounded. I liked how it felt on my palate, like a piece of very fine candy. My phone vibrated again. It was a voice message from Robert. I put on the noise-canceling headphones that the airline provided, those wonderful little devices that completely isolate the outside world. I hit play. "Mom, please." His voice was breaking. He was actually crying. "We have no way to get home." Chloe broke her heel. "It is raining so hard. Just unblock the card for the taxi. I promise I will pay you back. Please, Mom. Do not be cruel. We are your family." I listened to the message twice, analyzing the exact tone. There was fear, yes, there was extreme discomfort, but above all, there was total disbelief. He simply could not believe that his mother, his endless, bottomless well of resources, had actually shut off the tap. He was calling me cruel for forcing him to solve a basic problem that any functional adult should be able to handle. He called me family when it was financially convenient for him, but he called me a cat sitter when I was standing in his way. I took off the headphones and stared at the screen. I typed out my first and only response of the entire night. Robert, you have your health and your youth, two things money cannot buy. You have your suitcases packed with your clothes, so use that ingenuity you claim to have. The taxi ride home costs less than a single bottle of the wine you were planning to order at dinner tonight. Sell something if you have to. Welcome to the real world. I will see you in 2 weeks. P.S. Do not forget Whiskers medicine at 8 p.m. sharp. I hit send, and immediately after, I switched the phone to airplane mode. The disconnection was intensely physical. I felt as if an invisible cable that had been tied tightly around my chest had finally snapped. Dinner arrived. The lobster smelled like absolute glory, bathed in a rich, golden, creamy sauce. Julian, the architect, raised his glass of red wine toward me from across the aisle. To Paris, Beatrice. I raised my champagne glass, which sparkled under the cabin's dim lights. To Paris, Julian, and to the Bastille, because sometimes you just have to demolish the old prison so you can build something brand new. I ate with a voracious appetite. Every single bite was a loving homage to my new life. I thought about Robert and Chloe, soaking wet, probably waiting for a city bus, or calling some poor friend to ask for the highly embarrassing favor of picking them up. I am sure they were absolutely furious. I am sure tomorrow they would badmouth me to the entire extended family. They would say I went completely crazy, that I am just a bitter old woman. Let them say whatever they want. History is written by the victors, and in this exact moment, the victor was flying at 600 miles per hour, in business class, heading straight for the City of Light. I finished my dinner and reclined my seat until it converted into a fully horizontal bed. The flight attendant brought me a soft duvet and a plush feather pillow. I took off my orthopedic shoes and stretched my toes. I closed my eyes, but not to sleep just yet. I closed them to visualize my arrival. I saw myself stepping off the plane, breathing in the cold air of France. I saw myself hailing a taxi, all by myself, without anyone barking at me what to do, and giving the hotel address in the French I had learned from old textbooks. Hotel Regina, s'il vous plaît. I smiled in the darkness. Robert was absolutely right about one thing. It was going to be an unforgettable trip. He just got the main character wrong. This was not his trip. It never was. The plane gave a slight jolt from some turbulence, but it did not scare me. I felt cradled. For the first time in decades, I did not have to worry about whether someone had an ironed shirt, or if there was enough food in the refrigerator. I only had to worry about myself. And that responsibility, which used to seem so terrifying to me, now felt like the single greatest gift life could have ever given me. Tomorrow I would buy clothes. Tomorrow I would see the Eiffel Tower. Tomorrow Beatrice would finally start living. But first, I was going to sleep for 8 solid hours, with 0 interruptions, without cats meowing, and without ungrateful children demanding a piece of my soul. Good night, world. Good morning, freedom. The air in Paris did not smell like expensive perfume the way I had always imagined, but rather like recent rain on old cobblestones and freshly baked bread. It was a deeply honest scent that filled my lungs the second I stepped out of the taxi in front of the Hotel Regina. The driver, an older gentleman with a gray mustache who barely spoke any English, opened the door for me with a polite bow that Robert had not even given me on the day of his own wedding. "Bienvenue, madame," he said, helping me step out carefully, but without treating me like I was made of fragile glass. Madam. Not grandma, not ma'am, not little old lady. Madam. I straightened my camel coat, which was the only thing I owned right now, besides my purse, and my newly recovered dignity. I walked into the hotel lobby with heavy, confident steps. The crystal chandeliers sparkled over the polished marble floors, and for a split second, the ghost of the insecure Beatrice, the one who was terrified of not knowing how to behave in a place like this, tried to peek her head out. But I chased her away instantly by touching the black card resting in my pocket. I was paying for this. I absolutely belonged here. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed young man, did not even bat an eye when he saw me arriving without any luggage. On the contrary, When I explained in my slow, careful English that the airline had experienced a logistical issue with my bags, he immediately offered me a luxury toiletry kit and a complimentary glass of wine. I went up to my room. It was stunning, with heavy velvet curtains and a massive window that looked right out over the Tuileries garden. I stepped up to the glass. Right out there was the exact city I had taught in my classrooms for 40 straight years. The city of lights, of bloody revolutions, of ultimate freedom, and I was standing right in the dead center of it. Completely alone, without a pair of pajamas, but with my soul fuller than it had ever been. I sat on the edge of the giant bed and pulled out my phone. The time had come to face the reality I had left on the other side of the ocean, but this time, strictly on my own terms. I had 3 new messages from Robert. There was no more screaming, no more demands. The tone had shifted radically, the exact way a rebellious student's tone shifts the second they realize the principal has walked into the room. "Mom, we finally made it to the house. We had to borrow money from the neighbor to pay the taxi." It was so humiliating. "Chloe is really upset, but I think we understand your point. Are you okay? Please let us know you made it. We are genuinely worried." I did not feel any vindictive satisfaction, just a very deep, settling calm. The lesson had finally sunk in. They had to borrow money. They had to feel the sting of public shame. They had to solve a problem completely without me. I replied with an audio message so they could hear my voice, perfectly firm, without a single tremor. "Robert, Chloe, I am settled into my hotel looking at the Eiffel Tower in the distance. I am perfectly fine. I am glad you made it home safely. You have 2 full weeks to reflect on exactly how we are going to coexist when I get back, because things are going to change drastically. Oh, and do not forget to scoop the cat's litter box. Hugs." I locked the screen. I did not wait for a response. My attention no longer belonged to them. The next morning, I woke up with a very clear mission. I needed clothes. My dresses, my sensible shoes, and my older woman blouses were currently being held hostage somewhere in my home country's airport, probably sitting in the trunk of my son's car. I went down to eat a buttery croissant that practically melted in my mouth and a strong black coffee. Then I hit the streets. I walked all the way to the Galeries Lafayette. Walking in there felt exactly like walking into a grand temple, but instead of saints, there were mannequins draped in fine silks and rich wools. A saleswoman approached me. In another lifetime, I would have immediately scanned for the clearance rack or asked for clothing appropriate for my age, those drab gray and beige garments designed specifically to make us invisible. But not today. "I am looking for a dress," I told her, pointing to one in the window display, "and I do not want it in gray. I want it in blue, royal blue." I tried on pieces that Chloe would have sworn were totally ridiculous for me. A silk scarf with a bold geometric print, soft leather shoes with just a little bit of a heel, a striking red coat. Staring at myself in the fitting room mirror, I saw a woman I did not even recognize. She had wrinkles, yes. She had stark white hair, yes. But her eyes were shining with a fiery, youthful mischief. I bought everything. I swiped the black card without an ounce of guilt, knowing full well that every single euro I spent was a euro that would not be wasted on anyone else's selfish whims. I walked out of the department store carrying my own shopping bags, feeling the absolutely delicious weight of my own free choice. I walked down toward the Seine. I sat on a wooden bench facing the grayish water, watching the tourist boats glide by. The cold wind put a healthy pink flush in my cheeks. A young woman sat down next to me, maybe around Chloe's age, reading a paperback book. She smiled at me. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" she said in French. I nodded, and pulling from my deep well of reading memories, I replied, "Oui, c'est magnifique." We started chatting, mixing English, a little Spanish, and hand gestures. Her name was Sophie. I gave her the short version of my story, telling her it was my first time in Paris and that I had just escaped a life that had grown entirely too small for me. She laughed out loud and told me I seemed like a very brave woman. Brave, I repeated the word, truly savoring it. I was not always brave, child. Sometimes bravery is the absolute only thing you have left, when everything else is stripped away. That afternoon, I went up the Eiffel Tower. I did not wait in the line for the stairs. I paid for the elevator straight to the very top. As the sprawling city grew tiny beneath my feet, I thought about my late husband. He had meticulously saved this money for us, for our golden years. I had always believed that spending it all by myself would be a terrible treason to his memory. But looking out at that infinite horizon, I finally understood that he did not save that money so I could be our son's live-in maid. He saved it so I could be free. "Look, old man," I whispered into the wind. "We finally made it." I felt a sense of absolute profound peace. The crushing mother's guilt, the very thing that had kept me tied down for years, completely dissolved in the high-altitude air. Robert and Chloe were fully grown adults. If they fell down, they would just have to pick themselves back up. I was no longer their eternal safety net. I was Beatrice, the history teacher, who was finally out here living her own damn history. The following days were an absolute whirlwind of museums, corner cafes, and long, winding walks. I learned how to navigate the metro system. I got completely lost twice, and I found myself 3 times. I ate pungent, strong cheeses and drank bold wine right at noon. On the night before my flight back, I sat down in the hotel restaurant for my final dinner. I asked for a table for one, right by the window. I pulled out my little notebook. Throughout the trip, I had been writing, not a travel diary, but a concrete life plan. Number 1, the house. It is entirely too big for me. I will sell it. I will buy a small, easy-to-clean condo right near the cultural center, where they offer painting classes. Number 2, the money. Whatever is left over from the sale, plus my savings, will become an untouchable travel fund. Robert will just have to learn how to survive on his own salary. Number 3, the boundaries. If they want to see me, it will be strictly by invitation. No more free laundry service. No more bottomless loans. I read over the list and smiled. It was my brand new constitution, my personal declaration of independence. The waiter brought me the check, and right along with it, a small box of artisan chocolates. On the house, Madame Beatrice. It has been an absolute pleasure having you here. Your energy is truly inspiring. I thanked him with a very generous tip. I stepped out onto the street to look at the illuminated Eiffel Tower one last time. Its lights flickered like brilliant diamonds against the pitch-black sky. I thought about the exact moment I would touch down back home. I knew Robert and Chloe would be waiting there, probably holding cheap flowers, desperately trying to patch things up, or maybe sporting long, resentful faces, fully expecting an apology. It simply did not matter. The woman who was going to land was not the same woman who took off. The Beatrice who babysat cats and constantly apologized just for existing had been left behind in Terminal 2, vanishing entirely like a wisp of smoke. The woman returning was wearing a striking red coat, knew exactly how to order a glass of wine in French, and was crystal clear on the fact that her life, her actual true life, was just starting its very first chapter. I caught my reflection in the dark glass of a closed shop window. I gave myself a quick wink. "Well done, Professor," I said softly. Class dismissed. I turned around and walked back toward the hotel with the firm, heavy step of someone who knows that, from this moment on, the only baggage she will ever carry is the weight of her own dreams. The trip to Paris was officially over, but Beatrice's journey had only just begun.